What's good, everyone? Ben from People Nerds. Thank you for spending a little bit of your time with us. Nick is our illustrious guest for today. We're going to be going through data visualization, how you can get started, some foundations to get you going as you think about presenting what could be open-ended, complex, certainly nuanced data in more resonant ways. All right, cool. Well, let's get started. And again, folks, thanks so much for spending a little bit of your time with us.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Of course.
None of the other attendees are coming live from their mom's basement, but I see that.
I am a quilter, okay? This is I am live from the home HQ in Detroit. Mama Weedmeyer, Mama People Nerd. She's a quilter.
Say hi to your mother for me. All right, all right. Hello, nerds. Let's get going. All right, I'm going to share my screen there. Okay, this is Scale Your UX Impact with Data Visualization. And I will run through pretty quickly. My speaking style, as you could probably already tell, is a bit frantic. I'm standing up right now, so you're going to get a lot of movement and hand waving, metaphorically as well as literally. Please do insert questions as they come in. That kind of frantic style lends itself to distraction and riffing and tangents and things like that. So you won't be bored. You may be confused, but you won't be bored. Let's go. All right. Yep, that's me. Those are a lot of words. I won't go into those details, but my background is in interaction design and user experience, and I got kind of bored pushing pixels around, and I wanted to talk with real people. And so as user research became a part of user experience, so drifted into that area. At some point in my career, I went to the University of Sydney in Australia, and my professor there was a data visualization evangelist and steered me into that direction. And so it all sort of coalesces and comes together. I teach at CCA here in San Francisco, which has an MBA in design strategy. Hello to all of our CCA participants. And I think we've already told where we're reporting in from. If you have anybody that you're working for that's interesting, go ahead and pop that in there. So that's me. You can find out more about me at gauge.io. All right, so 5 basic sections today. How to collect and structure data for visualization purposes, different models for analysis. Then we're going to spend the bulk, about 20 minutes, of a demonstration of a platform I've built specifically for this workshop. And we're going to talk about how to work with others within our departments and our teams. As researchers, that's one of the verbs that we're looking at is scaling and impact. We want to be able to resonate our insights to other researchers, to executives, to product teams, and how do we use visualization and what kind of considerations do we have around that will be the next 2 sections, and then questions and answers can come in at any point. So that is our run through today, and we should take about an hour. Feel free to hang around if you need to. Okay, if you get bored, this is up and running. Thank you to all the hard work from my friends in the Ukraine and India who have helped me get this up and running over the last week or two. Sandbox.gauge.io will give you the ability to upload your own CSV files, comma-separated values, and then run them against different APIs for analysis for things like tone and sentiment, classification, keywords and mappings. And I say accessible for a limited time only because I'm not sure how much is this going to cost me. And the more you use it, the better off we'll be. But let's go ahead and see how it goes. So sandbox.gauge.io, feel free to, I know we are in a multi-screen world. Feel free to pop that up and just listen to me in the background, coming back into the talk as you need be. Let's hope it doesn't crash. Okay, there is a precedence. The data visualization is not new. It's been around, especially on the quant side, for quite some time. We're used to seeing charts and graphs for things like Qualtrics, heat maps, and statistical summaries of what's going on in the world around us. Marketing details like churn and revenue rate and things like that are easy, relatively. But when we get to the world of research, we deal with a lot of unstructured text. Those sort of traditional software suites like MaxQDA have really some basic classification and coding. You see on the bottom right there that word cloud, which early web pioneer Jeffrey Zeldman called the mullet of the internet. That joke was funny before they shut down the barber shops for 6 months, and now it hits a little close to home. But that's what hair gel's for. And so we have these methods, early methods of visualization that we can start to see and understand and parse unstructured text. And I'll go into that a little bit more as we go through our glossary section right now. I want to discuss some shared vocabulary between us so that we know what words we're using and what they might mean. I've used structured and unstructured already this afternoon. Unstructured, let's start with number 2, is free-form data. It's out with definition or models. It's text heavy. It can be anything from comments to speech to words, unigrams and bigrams, things that don't follow any kind of format but are just coming in transcribed or typed. And structured data is that which fits into a set of items or options. We know it's going to be one of these 5 things, one of these 50 things. It's a state, like a regional state or a selection in a drop-down list. Those are structured data for which we can start to use as what we're calling comparative factors. And the real emphasis of this application is to watch how the unstructured change as we start to change the structures as well, where you can start to compare who is saying what. I've talked about factors already. A factor is a dimension of structured data. It's a category or a characteristic for which we can compare against. Keywords. Now, words that are frequently found in bodies of text, it's not the words themselves, it's that we're starting to take these sentences out and bring out keywords or summative words that can describe what is being talked about in unstructured text. And lastly, at a higher level is a topic, an assumption on the subject matter for which the unstructured data is trying to describe. I could be talking about, popular analogy would be cats, where I've got all of these sort of positive things that I'm saying about cats. And that topic would be under pets, where the keyword might be cats itself, but the topic is under pets. So it goes a level of abstraction higher than the actual literal words within the keywords or the sentences themselves. Tone, attributes of emotion as derived through the usage of words. There are 7 of them that we're going to be using today: disgust, anger, and fear. We can start to look at combinations of words and derive tone from them of what people are saying are identifying this as these types of emotions. Social language is very similar. They're identifiable cues that try to summarize your personality. Are you open? Are you aggressive? Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? What is your emotional range? These are all sort of AI, natural language understanding of how people are describing themselves or things. And the last is sentiment, which is a more binary measure of positive and negative. And the same kind of analysis as tone and social language, where we're trying to see if what they're saying identifies with being positive or being negative. Are we seeing that they're angry or that they're happy? Again, tone, social language, and sentiment are 3 dimensions of perspective that we're starting to look at unstructured text. Cool. All right. Step 1. Let's start with a story. This pixelated picture, for the sake of privacy, on the right is a researcher that I worked with from Atlanta, Georgia. Hello, Atlanta. She works currently at the CDC, but while she was doing her graduate work in the School of Public Health, she and I teamed together on some research projects. And I was so impressed by her methodology and structuring of which the conversations with our participants went, to the point where I knew that if question C was being asked, that we were 40 minutes into our conversation and therefore looking towards a wrap up fairly soon. Her authoring and adhering to a conversation guide during these one-on-one interviews was so rigorous and disciplined that it allowed for her to duplicate her results. She was used to not doing industry research on, in this case, technology, but instead doing field research for public health issues like women's health and hygiene for migrant working communities. Investigations and research that were A, funded by the government, and B, had to be defendable and replicable. And I've taken that exposure and really abided by that, because what that structure allowed me to do when we were taking the transcripts of all the participants was to identify, okay, we're on question 1 and question 1's answer is this, or we're on question 2 and question 2's answer is this, is to follow that same structure as we translate this unstructured data from spoken word into text that we can use on a screen. Boop. Let's talk about scale of collection. Now the story that I just gave you about that researcher was less than 100 rows of text. We had 12 different participants, and each of them answered 10 different questions. And so our rows were only about 100, 120, and we would translate those and gather them into spreadsheets. And that's kind of starting with an individual researcher or a team of researchers that's coming back and bringing in transcribed text or video to start to visualize and see what's coming in there. And then you can go a step up with surveying or scraping. Now, for those mixed method researchers where we're going and asking open input questions or asking people to describe, or being inside of surveying tools, NPS or Qualtrics, whatever you use, we can now scale this up to 1,000 to 1,000,000, because the people hours involved with gathering this transcription is not as rigorous. And what I've been doing a lot of is scraping. And when you look at that sandbox, you can go and see that we've scraped Twitter, we've scraped Craigslist, we've scraped Ashley Madison, and we've scraped TikTok, where we can start to pull down what people are saying online and then scale this up to now from the thousands to the millions of rows of data, because it's an automated task. And the arena in which we've been playing in, a previous client, Airbnb, was in the tune of 40 million rows, where we're integrating internally with companies' APIs, their application protocol interfaces, and pulling in their data through that, where now it's no longer us from the outside trying to draw it in. It's now a connection happening between research and enterprise, and being able to go at the bigger picture. Scale type. Thank you for the question, Ben. I see that we're having a, where are you in terms of your scale of collection? Are we
I was just
individual?
curious what folks were finding themselves. It looks like we've got 66% about gathered, 25% now surveyed, and we're just about to hit 10% with integrated. Thanks for checking out the poll, y'all. I'll keep this going.
Boom, hammer that like button, hit the subscribe button, and we'll keep doing these videos. I want to answer Sarah's question. Sorry if this gets covered. A UX researcher, what kind of analysis should I be able to do, and what programs should I get comfortable with? Matt at Discount is going to answer this question live. Okay, everything is qualitative. So what tools do we start to use? Google Analytics, R, SPSS, Python. So the tool should address the need. If the need is statistical analysis, then yes, some of those quant-based tools are going to be helpful. If we are researchers and we are meant to deliver strategy and insight on product, now it becomes a lot more qualitative, and your stories that you tell are going to be much more emotionally driven. We'll cover those types of strategic narratives as we get to some of the later sections.
Nick, we had one other question just about the sandbox. Is that presently in English only in terms of the output?
Great question. One of the limitations currently of this AI-based world is a lot of English-based processing abilities. Now, you can translate from Spanish to English, or Indonesian to English, or Irish to English, but there's something lost in that translation. So there is a emphasis on English speaking text. As we're working on it now, let's see what happens when we put in Italian, or we put in something different. It's not going to break, and I would be interested to see if that classification and that tone analysis works as well. What some of these suites have is the ability to translate from one language to the other, but we haven't currently implemented that now. As not to put you all into epileptic shock, let me get past this, this screen here. When we were recruiting for a mobile ethnography project, sound familiar, Ben? One thing we did with the recruiter was get a list of participants that was 1,000 or so people deep. And again, this was a technology-based one, which is why you're seeing the different iPhones come up. And we wanted to use visualization for recruitment purposes. And I wasn't comfortable putting a spreadsheet in front of a client and saying, close your eyes and pick one. And so to aggregate this survey response, we wanted to use visualization to help us choose an accurate participant list as it would be distributed not only across the country geographically, because we would end up going into their homes, but also across the different segments of how they answer the questions. And for another conversation on another day, we'll talk about persona development through segmentation, where we're starting to take the answers of the questions, and that's on the right-hand side, and see participants as they cluster into different groups, early adopters or late bloomers in terms of technology adoption, and then we can start to author our conversation guides or exercises accordingly for one versus the other. So we're doing the same kind of factors as you see on the right, and the nodes of red, yellow, and purple are participant answers and how they start to form into groups. And those groups are evidence-based personas, which can inform how we start to approach our research and which participants we choose to engage with. Okay, I'm going to take a breath there. What is our typical scale of data? We see a lot of them are gathering data, and some are surveying and some are integrating. So I'll try to keep it on the individual researcher or the team of in-depth researchers so we can have that kind of context. We're going to bleed naturally into the integrated just because of the nature of this talk, but I'll try to keep it more into that individual connection. Okay, better structuring through factors. I grouped factors into 3 different types. We have an attitudinal approach where the participant believes something and they've stated their beliefs through Likert scale, strongly agree, strongly disagree. Can I share that? They can show NPS scores where they have either an evangelist or a detractor. Rating scales where they're saying 1 through 5. In our experiences, those have been so skewed, and I'd be eager to hear what the crowd says about this. Is that when we are getting rating data, what we're seeing is that it's so 4s and 5s that you need to have enough scale to efficiently find a distribution of opinion, because just a small sample is going to get you 95% 4s and 5s of positivity. And so it's another reason to try to go at a higher level to be able to really see why and what's making negative experiences that way. If you recall, Netflix has gone away from, was it a 5-star movie or was it just a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Behavioral. What have I done in my past? Is my usage and my adoption? What features have I used? What activities? Who have I connected with on my network? It's a factor that's a behavioral factor. We're looking at this from a dimension of what people have done. And the last are the inherent qualities of, let's call it the participant, the row, the user, the demographic. Are they old? Are they young? What ethnicity they have? How do they identify with gender? Where are they from? These are 3 different types of factors that you can compare against for unstructured data. And we can get these in different places. We can collect them ourselves, like the attitudinal. We can go out and survey. We can go and look at usage logs or what features the user might have turned on in our software product, if that's something that you look at, or things they might have bought if you are more of a brick and mortar. And then the demographic can be user profile. So yeah, I'm going to jump into some questions real quick. Joni, the question about that visualized tool is, like you'll see with the sandbox, these are all custom visualization displays that we've built for research teams. You can find some k-means clustering. I'm going to write that down. There are some freely available web-based tools that if you want to go and start to see some cluster analysis based upon factors, you can visit their browsers and they'll be able to do that for you. But for our purposes, we were working with a data set of participants and we wanted to be able to group them and cluster them so that we would be able to, from an evidence perspective, form personas that were accurate. Okay.
Nick, very quickly, if I could interject.
Yep.
Amanda had a question about rating scale and level. I assumed that you meant like nominal, ordinal, sort of categorical level of factoring versus ratio or interval. So, is it gender identity versus your temperature today? Those sorts of answers on the questions changes, alters, shifts how you might approach both analyzing it and certainly visualizing it. But I wanted to open that to
Yep.
you if there was something more that you went there.
Yeah, we are going to talk about metric data in a second, and the temperature comes to mind. You won't see much of a difference between those who, well, in times of COVID, those who are 98 versus 97 in terms of temperature, but you may see a difference between those who identify as one gender versus another. So a part of our data transformation is going to be grouping and categorizing so that we can more efficiently find differences in subsets that start to show comparison.
Thank you, Nick.
I hope that answered your question. That was good vocabulary on that. So when collecting for data visualization, qualitative researchers, this doesn't work so well if we just dump in a bunch of text and hope to see something out of it. It works better if we have a script and a structure that we can say, this is question and it goes there, this is question and it goes there, that we have context in place for which we're comparing against one another. And if all the questions are the same, that we can now compare against the factors and the genders or whatever our factors might be, so that we can see how their answers start to break differently. I'm new to this field. I'd like to think that I'm still sort of feeling around about where pockets of expertise are, but it surprises me that people don't record sessions. When I hear that, I think it's a missed opportunity, whether even it's just audio or if it's audio and video, making sure you have that artifact, because the hard work of getting a participant and getting a conversation guide and getting everything up in the room is already done. You can do so much with those sessions from an artifact standpoint. And then there is a annotate or timestamp section breaks, is the ability to break it down into question to question to question. And I'm going to jump over. Let me see if I can show you this real quick. I've got a couple slides here. These are some data sets which we're going to go from a structure perspective. And there is a section on this user guide, which will be sent out, that talks about transcribing speech and how to go from Zoom recordings, how to work with video files, and how to strip out timestamps. A lot of questions people asking me, when I have a video file, how do I get it into text base? What you can do is you can upload it to YouTube. YouTube will close caption it. You can download it, and then there is I've got some stripping algorithms that will take out all the timestamps. So now it gives you the raw text, and you just need to copy and paste them into different questions. There is some data cleaning involved if you're going from video files, just raw video or audio files, but that's a part of it. The joke about data scientists, it's 80% cleaning and transformation and only 20% analysis. Okay, so the last part about this slide is what to do with if you're a quantitative and mixed researchers. Pair open inputs with numeric responses. It's one of the best things you can do. So ask a question and then ask why you said that. Ask it an attitudinal question and then say explain what it is that makes that a 5 or makes that a 1, so that you can start to pair that we've got this group of detractors and they're angry because of this, or we've got this group of evangelists and they're happy because of this. Try to leverage different dimensions of data. If you have participants that you know are having user profiles or having buying histories or whatever it might be that your company offers, try to get that information in for your own analysis, that you can see these questions are attributed to our heavy users or these questions are attributed to that, or survey them if you don't have access to maybe products database of users and their attributes. And most importantly, don't lose the stories behind the stats. A lot of this is shiny bells and whistles and nodes that flash and pixels that light up on the screen, but don't ever lose that emotional connection in the background of the story behind the reason, because your narratives are going to be so much better if you can tie them back to personal stories.
Nick, may I interject for a hot second? Super
Hot
hot
sec.
second. Hot second. For those of y'all who are not familiar, People Nerds is the imprint of D-Scout, and I So I work in both of the worlds. I would be remiss if I didn't say that all the stuff that Nick just described, timestamping, transcription, this all happens automatically with most of our tools. So if you're a current customer of DScout, you should check out our live video platform. We talked to people like Nick who are researchers and thinkers in this area. And we asked, if you were to have a moderated research tool, what would it have? And we built most of those things into that platform. So I'll ask my colleague Matt to drop a link to learn more about DScout Live. Just quick bump, Nick.
Nice plug. Nice
Right?
sponsorship.
Right? Yes,
We're
yes. I
gonna
wish we had like a. This segment brought to you by Ben's Job.
Yeah,
Let's keep it.
unstructured. Yeah, yeah. Good luck with that. All right, so unstructured versus structured. So I'm going to show you this example, and you'll see this on the sandbox where factor name, and text. Factor name is question one. We asked 3 participants, one representing persona A, one representing persona B, one persona C. We asked them questions. Okay, now persona A, question 1, this was based upon this product, and they said this. And so we're creating these structured categories of factors for which we can then toggle and compare and use. And when you multiply this by 10,000, 10 million, you can start to see trends of one factor compared to the other as we start to process this unstructured text. When you're looking at metrics, things like age or count, you want to group them up, because in the analogy you gave, Ben, about the temperature difference between 97 and 98, it's not going to be as revealing as you would for, let's say, if you had, are these participants over 100 degrees, and did they say they had a cough in the last 30 days? And as well, I showed you some examples of what are called quintiles and quartiles, where you have these values and you want to have quartiles, and that would result you in transforming your data into these types of sections. And you can find some online available web tools, or Google Sheets has a formula that you can use. I've done stuff like that on this TikTok data. This is one of the 4 data sets that you can see. And the number of followers, like the difference between somebody who had 1 follower and 2 followers wasn't any big difference, but to establish quintiles about the number of followers, so that I can now start to see, okay, this is a low, and this is a medium, and this is a high, by transforming that data and then uploading those as categorical factors. And the same thing is true with, let's say, the state or the zodiac sign. Hello to all you Leos out there. I think we've just changed into our moon stage, question mark. Yeah, okay, so taking another breath. Factors, we're trying to define and gather and see what kind of factors that we can assemble, so that when that unstructured rows comes in, we can use those factors as comparison points, because it's not necessarily just the flat analysis, it's as much how one variable changes to another. And we are going to go into our demonstration right now, and I'm going to hope to show you some examples of that, provided the website still works. All right, and I've said this already, visualization should always be complementary to in-person research. Employing visualization in the research process, open modeling and generative directions. Well, let's come back to this. Let's switch things around a little bit. Okay, let's go into that. Everybody see this okay? All right, so here's the sandbox. We've got some requirements for uploading your own data set, and here's your sort of structure that we showed earlier. A CSV file, Sheets or Excel will export out as a comma separated value file, and make sure you include your header row. That header row is going to get turned into a label for what category or factor is this and what you want to see underneath this. And underneath that is going to be a number of unique items. So it's going to be, do you want to select persona A, persona B, persona C? We need at least 500 words. The last column should contain your text, and you have a maximum of 3 columns of factors. A lot of rules, Ben. And only the first 10,000 rows will be processed, and you can upload your CSV there, and then it'll process it, and off you go. So I can go and find that. It should find an abridged set of TikTok, boop, 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 and then you can remove it like that. However, what I'm going to do is start to look at some of these pre-processed bits of data. This is inspired by some of my forebearers within the industry, Fernando Villegas and Martin Wattenberg and Jason Davies and Jason Kessler, all those who have put interactive data visualizations of unstructured text online for people to play with. And there's this wonderful vision of Craigslist back when I think there was a different category other than misconnections, but it was sort of a hookup site. And the joke about that was the nature in which people were describing themselves and what you were looking for. And so for this data set, we went and scraped 9,000 Craigslist posts and tried to find people talking about themselves and what they might be looking for. You say, I'm straight. We need to put another banner up and say there will be things in the next 20 minutes that will not be appropriate for children. So if you are under the age of 18, just turn off your screen now, go on a TikTok and spend time there instead.
And start vaping. Yeah, grab your vape.
Because this is the uncensored portion of today's conversation. Okay, so what we've done is we've parsed 9,000 rows of misconnections, and we want to see if there's any differences between them. Now, if you remember the data set, it is, what are we looking at here? Are we looking at, yes, this is Ashley Madison, I'm sorry. So this is Ashley Madison. We have categories of who is seeking whom, men seeking males or female seeking males or whatever it might be, the zodiac sign, the state, and then the text. And so what we want to see is how this might change. And these are the factors of which I was describing for the rows are coming out of the categories. The process for scraping data. Farrah, the question on process for scraping data, there are several of them. There are some that are illegal and there are some that are legal. Legally, you can go and interface with a company's API if they're a data-centric company, and you can pull down data at a pre-agreed rate. There are illegal methods in which you go and you send an automated browser to go through a web page, grab a bit of information, put that information into a spreadsheet, and then go to a different web page, grab that bit of same structure tag, grabbing things and putting them in the web stream. And there's everything from browser extensions in Chrome to people on Upwork and freelance sites that will go and do that for you at a large scale. So there's the legit and then there's the illicit. If you recall, Zuckerberg created Facebook from scraping all of the colleges at Harvard University and made the Facebook with that same kind of utility. Worked out well for everybody, didn't it? Okay, so going back to Ashley Madison, and I just can't stop going back to Ashley Madison. We have a representation of our data set, and this first sunburst is a grouping of the different topics and categories as it's interpreted from a classifier, meaning what are people talking about on Ashley Madison and what tones can we associate with what they're talking about. So we have 7 different tones that we're looking at: analytical, anger, confident, fear, joy, sadness, and tentative. And it looks like there's no disgust, disgust in how people are positioning themselves on Ashley Madison. So we're looking at these different divisions of topics as they're associated with different tones. The light blue is analytical. Light and dark for one color is very and somewhat. I'm using a sort of a tinting to say if it's a high level of saturation, it means it's very something. And if it's a light level of saturation, it's somewhat. It's a ranking that we get back in terms of the value of its relevance. Red we know is anger. Pink is not so angry, but still sort of showing up in the anger. Purple is confident. Green is fear. Yellow is joy. Muted blue, I think, is sadness. Yep, sadness. And then teal is tentative. And we see here on the top bar, this is a distribution of the rows that contain these emotions. We can see the same distribution here where each row has that color coordinates. These are joyous in the yellow ones, and these are teal is tentative. I'm tired of feeling trapped in a loveless marriage. Yeah, okay. So this is one representation of display. Hierarchy, where we have something like society, and then a social institution and divorce. We're going to see a lot of that as it is defined across all different tones. Laura, your question about the tones being defined by the researcher, the product team, or these standard tones used frequently. These standard tones are coming off of tone analysis services. We're using an external service that gives us these tones. We even had ones about, you talked about social language, where we were analyzing it in terms of openness and aggressiveness. So these are standard, I'm going to say, industry standard tones that we can start to measure against. Same thing with sentiment, where if we change this from tone to sentiment, then we should be able to see a distribution of how this all works now from a positive and negative standpoint. So there's this big negativity around divorce as we look at the Ashley Madison profiles. When we expand out the relevant rows again, now we see positive, the gray is neutral, and then the red will be negative. Yeah.
Nick, that's a great, I think this is a good point. DScout has been thinking more about accessibility, not just DScout, but the whole UXR world, about accessibility and thinking about tipping one's hand. You know, I think it might be argued, or it could be argued, that universally folks think about negative in red and positive in green, but the variations in between, you know, are we following Roy G. Biv so as to make it sort of unbiased? You know, these data have a positionality and a subjectivity about them. And so I think both Sarah's question and Laura's really get at some, I think they're rather unanswerable beyond that, because you could be biasing the data in some way if somebody likes a particular color, or if your stakeholders are colorblind. There's, I mean, then do we do patterning or shading? So great comments from both Laura and Sarah.
I think the question about English versus non-English, the association with colors as being positive and negative are all biases that we're bringing into this. Before leaving this conversation in the next 20 minutes, I want to make sure we outline and understand the considerations of use for when we start to abstract at this level. What I've done now is I've gone and parsed down to a just male seeking males and seeing if this distribution changes at all. I'm also going to go into this display here called scatter text. So scatter text is taking the rows and showing the keywords. We've now gone from 9,000 rows to 1,100. So there's a subset here, and we're looking. We're looking at different keywords that are coming up and finding abstractions for these rows. They're being associated with different tones. That's where the colors are coming in, but we can use these in as sort of entry points. So let's see what man associates with. So I've clicked on one of those keywords, and I want to see now, again, this is men seeking men, so we know that this is a nuance around those sentences. So I'm now wanting to know what that desire is from a sentence level. We've gone from a large topic level to a keyword level, sort of mapping frequency and relevance, and now we've found an outlier or something we want to go in deeper with, and then going into the specific contexts of use. How accurate? Margaret Aiken asks, the human language is quite nuanced. How accurate is the computer AI analysis of tone? Do you cross-check with human analysis? Great question. What I would do, and let's jump back into our display. We'll go back into the sandbox in just a second. Do you cross-check? Where should we start? Open modeling. We can use tools like this for what should we talk about. In that TikTok data set, we can find that there are issues, negative issues around other people and bullying on that platform. We can see that at scale because of the frequency in which it comes up. So how do we confirm? How do we find those nuances? Well, those lend themselves to in-depth interviews or conversations or mobile ethnography studies that are moderated by a person. And we go into what's from an open model of what is it that we're looking at to a closed model of here's what we want to talk about. We want to target and confirm or refute these hypotheses that we've seen. So we go from many and a very sort of generative discussion to one that's more of a synthesis of we want to start to figure out and confirm or refute things that are true or not true. And what has changed? Comparative iteration. If there's something that we've done over time, can we see that either we've improved a trust and safety feature or we've sort of prevented this from a organizational standpoint? Can we see that we've improved on those levels? Okay, so I was going to go over that. Let's go back into the visualization. I want to see if I can find something. Okan asks, does the margin of error occur when used in different languages? Okan, I can't speak to that very well. We've just in the infancy of this application, and I can't give you a comparison on whether or not English to Spanish or Spanish to English of what that level of fidelity is. Personally, I'm having a hard enough time just comprehending the sentiment and the tone as being accurate or inaccurate, let alone is this structure of language or the conversion of this language something that we're seeing as true or untrue. Okay, so for those of you who missed it, what I did is I found this Twitter. This came through the API for the person that asked that question earlier. That was I forgot. And grabbed tweets that contain the word "they are," and so these are comments within tweets, and I grabbed them from several different publications on the left and on the right of our political spectrum, conservative and liberal, as we would generalize it, and the number of likes that those comments received and the number of retweets that those comments received. And again, they contain the words "they are." And I wanted to see what came out. Can we see that some are angrier and some are more positive? So let's take it all. Okay, we've got this sort of segment here. There's a lot of anger towards law, government, and politics. Politics as well, unrest and war. And what happens if we take some of the more conservative-leaning publications like One American News Network, and we look at this display again, and that do we see that the subject matters change, especially and I'm thinking when we start to compartmentalize other people by saying they are, them, we were expressing negativity in our emotions, and it's okay, so what does that contain? But your questions on not only the translation of language, but the standardization of tone and emotion, the fidelity are the same questions that I'm asking as well. Is just how much can you trust this? Because it is a black box. It is under the hood at a large enterprise level technology company, and you're trusting the numbers that come back. And you're using them to make decisions and analysis that that are supposed to give you insight. Tabitha asks, are you categorizing the data set manually or by use of scripts? That is a use of script. We are sending these rows into a processor, and they're coming back with values of tone and values of sentiment and values of social language. And we are taking those and aggregating them and able to turn them and looking at different dimensions, and we are making visualizations to summarize these at scale. So this is now looking at the One American News Network news, and we see now, okay, their anger is business. They have something around business that was not typical towards the law, government, and politics that we've seen earlier. So if we go into scatter text and see, okay, what does that look like for them? Where are they from a keyword perspective finding those kinds of attributes? So under, wow, okay, red is anger. Conservative leaning publication has anger around masks. And then if we want to click into it, we can see that, okay, these are the levels of sentiment that they have. We can go back into this and look at this from a sentiment perspective and try to find negativity around their use of keywords. So we're using that filter of tone and sentiment to try to think they're negative there. But one thing I like to see is the usage of these types of keywords and where they start to come in.
Nick, I have a question for you as you're going through this, and
Sure.
Jessica says the sandbox is rad, so props to you.
Rad.
I'm curious because a lot of people nerds are presenting to a variability of kinds of stakeholders, folks who might be on more data-centric teams, and you might get to this when you're talking about collaborating with other kinds of teams. You said earlier that it's nice to pair a closed-ended sort of factor with an open-ended factor. What you're showing us here, that you've got this great sunburst, would you have like a percentage and say like for the One American News Network, this is the percentage, and then here is a visualization of the percentage? Do you have recommendations on balancing sort of the more traditional numbers that a user researcher might present along with some of the data viz that you've been showing today?
Yeah, the same criticism that we all get about you only talk to 6 people. Why would I make $1 million decision based upon that? Is going to be raised again unless you're working at a scale where you can say, look, we're seeing the differences between this factor and this factor at a scale of 10,000. Like what does the number have to be in order to get a stakeholder to believe it? It's a lot easier to scale at this level to say, well, the differences are in tens of thousands, and we ran this test last week and we saw this, and we ran it again this week and we saw that. So it's not that the argument changes, it's just that the numbers get greater. We're still going to have that kind of bridge to get over to instill confidence in the researcher that what they're saying is true. Carl, great question. If we look in the user guide, the data will be on the server for 48 hours, and then we have a cron job that removes all the data. There's good news and bad news to that. If you upload your data, please don't put any personal identifiable information, no email addresses, that's bad structured data anyways. But it will stay there for 48 hours, and you can grab that URL. If you want to share a URL with somebody within your organization, it will work for 48 hours. But then we wipe those off so that it's not staying there for any indeterminate period of time. Somewhere down the road, we will hopefully create accounts and persistence. But going back to your question, Ben, and I know we are about 10 minutes out if we keep on our regularly scheduled programming.
And I can, if you can stay over, I can stay over. Folks who have to jump, again, you'll get the recording. So Nick and I'll keep schmoozing, even if it's just the two of us and my colleague Matt. So yeah, Nick, I'm good to keep on, man. You've got
awesome.
a great section about framing and contextualizing a lot of what you've shown that I think is important to get to.
Right. Back to your question, Carl. Sorry, when it answers the questions, I lose who asked what. To the gentleman who asked, what do you do with your data? Carl, one thing that we should ensure is that if you have conversations with participants where you're transcribing and recording their data, have that in the terms of use of their signatory, so that when they are talking with you, they're not under the assumption this is a private conversation, it's between you and I, and then you as an individual are going to interpret it and report it back. But now give them confidence that you are, yes, you're going to collect their data, you're going to put it in a private server, it's not going to be revealing of who they are, you're going to obscure their identity, but do be at the forefront of honesty in the sense that you are changing your approach from private conversations into putting you into an algorithm somewhere. So that's, from an ethical standpoint, it's important to do that. Infrastructure, we mentioned that already, strip all personally identifiable information from any data set. What challenge that brings is that we want to tie in personal stories with nodes, dots on the screen. We want to make sure that we're able to go and find the person that this represents. Ethnographers works best in a large scale, so plan studies accordingly. If there are automated processes that you can take, whether it be scraping websites or asking surveys or doing something that can integrating with third party, doing something that can start to bring in outside sources of data, that really lends itself to complementing the individual researcher. Data scientists, our temptation is just give me everything on Ben, like give me his entire history. It's not a good approach because our temptation is just to collect all this data and figure out what we're going to do with it later. It's best, just like a conversation guide, a request to a data scientist or engineer or somebody on infrastructure to have a clear understanding of these are what we're going to look for, whether it be sentiment, whether it be tone, whether it be feature usage. These are the factors we're going to try to start to compare. As I've seen in the chat, there are no shortcuts found here. The lifting that's required to run and maintain and operate this is significant. And so when I talk to research ops professionals, hello for anybody that's in the reops channel, this requires some comprehension of what is needed to even get this to the table. But I think the industry is advancing to the point where we're certainly ready for that. And then from a stakeholder perspective, make sure we continue to access all platforms. As somebody raised their hand, well, we'll get back to them. All right, so here's the riff. Ben, I think this is a blog post that's in its infancy, is that we're looking at these abstractions and these patterns, whether it be that we're listening to unstructured data coming from our participants, interpreting them and reporting back, or we're creating visualizations and displays that look kind of funny and branch and start to scatter and divide. And now we're seeing them with enough repetition that we understand and can recognize these patterns. Things like that little mask node showing up wasn't anticipated when I was trying to orchestrate this display, but you can see and understand and contextualize that use into like, oh, okay, that's something that people are talking about, and that's a decision that we can make, and that's a focus area that we can have. Yeah, so we are tasked as researchers with interpreting the signal from the noise. And it's been around for a long time. As human beings, we naturally try to classify people. We talk about the nuances of the human language. How about the nuances of the human soul and the personality, whether it be East or West, whether or not you want to be zodiacs or year of the pig? We have a desire to think, I am a Leo, therefore I'm forthcoming in leadership and I wave my hands wildly. Well, no, that's not necessarily true, just because I have had a lot of coffee this morning. And I think that we just have this natural desire to put people and personalities and text into buckets because it gives us the ability to process it a lot better. This guy, Alan Clifton, has made millions selling workshops on how to classify people as strengths finder. You're an executor, you're a hugger, where you're just grouping people, and they may be completely different than those categories or classifications that we jump into. And I know I'm not the only one that thought of this when we're looking at the little balls from the movie Inside Out, where that's joy in the middle, and that's anger on the left, and there's disgust, and there's fear, and there's sadness, and these are tropes that we're assigning now to groups of thousands of people or opinions or things like that. So it's industry standard if you believe in the children's animation industry. And then we get into the dangerous part of things, behavioral modeling. You saw that in the user guide, one of the dimensions of analysis that we were initially using before they changed the terms of the API on us yesterday, where we're bringing back the same thing with tone. We were bringing up qualities of behavior like extroversion or neutrality or conscientiousness or openness, as we're seeing reflected by these spidergraphs. And that has been done before, where we can use those to exploit people by targeting different ads and different messages and different positioning to say, this person will be instigated by this based upon the people they follow, their behavioral profile, and we can begin to shift the message or shift the mindset by profiling people into one of these categories. So it can be used for evil just as it can for good. So as I've heard already, there are some considerations of use. There's skepticism. There should be some checks and balances on the use of this AI for insight. The analogy of we don't know what's under the hood, we've run a comparison against sentiment modelers, positive and negative, as it relates to the factor of positive rating versus negative rating, ratings 1 through 5. Okay, let's take all the 5s and we'll see which sentiment analysis services return back with this is a positive review. And then we took all the 1s and we sent them back to the same 6 services and say which ones are saying these are negative reviews. And you don't know which ones are the most accurate, which ones are they interpreting, but you're using that the human being that submitted this review said this was either very, very good or very, very bad. So therefore, the sentiment analysis service should match that as well. And it's hard to know what's under the hood. And sometimes, in the case of Rosetta, they're just using a third-party service and white labeling it as their own. Rosetta was using Amazon's AWS, we could see, because the results were identical, and trying to sell that in another spin. Transparency, data centricity can bring collaborators closer, meaning I can share this out with a community of 110 people on the internet, but does it increase trust? So if you come into your organization, or if you incorporate Gage's services into your research process, are we increasing the trust of the results that we're recommending? Or are we just, in the last one, creating more noise to make the signal harder to grok? It's hard to tell a story with all these new dimensions. It's like, well, what is this? What do the bones say? Like, okay, well, here's something that our researchers are hearing out in the field. Well, let's take a look at the tea leaves and see if we can confirm that. And that I don't mean to be so self-critical about this process or this product, but it's important to take everything with a grain of salt and be able to use it as sort of soft directions and waypoints. Great question from Jean Providence. Predefined factors and themes. Does the analysis allow any emerging themes that is not a part of the predetermined categories, sort of a grounded theory? Okay, so I'm going to answer the question as it relates to the themes. No, there is a hierarchy of categories, and I think we're talking about the divorce and the law and the business. Um, that kind of open topic modeling, that would be true topic modeling, where we take a corpus of text and we try to find which topics come out from an open perspective. Using classifiers, it comes from a directory of hierarchy to say that fits into this or fits into that. So it is closed in that sense. And then if you look at this from an open standpoint, you can go in and just see what comes out. But it can be a lot noisier. The initial approach was is to take one of those segments to be able to click down into that. So if I wanted to see the keywords associated with divorce with the tone angry, I could click and do so and have a lot of keywords about not washing dishes, things like that. Okay, I think we're at the end, Benjamin. My name is Nick. I sell bric-a-brac and knickknacks. I am here in Berkeley. You can see that's my little light on in the window there on the left-hand side. There's an outdoor cafe. If any of you are in the East Bay, we can socially have a coffee 6 feet away from one another. And you can find some time on my calendar. I'll put this into the Slack, the chat window. And I am on your Slacks for sure, because most of you are on the same research Slacks as I am. And I am happy to take some time to talk with you and find out about what your research is or find out about your business. In the healthy times, what I would do is I would come in and give a lunch and learn and talk about these different techniques and talk about some case studies that we've used with Adobe and Asurion and Airbnb and all of the different companies that we worked with. But now we can do the same thing over Zoom, and you don't have the displeasure of watching me generate crumbs all over my face and my mask. So that is it. Any questions, Ben?
I mean, I have many. I have many personally, but you and I will online. But yeah, y'all, Nick is talking about many other Slack communities. You'll be able to check him out in the coming weeks in the People Nerds Slack community. We're going to add you all to a private channel so that if there are things that you've discovered with the sandbox that he's created or other tools that you think are worthwhile for sharing, that'll be a repository for you all to share resources in as well. We're going to grab some more of Nick's time, and he'll be in there to answer any lingering questions. Jean Providence's question was the last one that I see. I guess one of the things you mentioned rather quickly, some of the forebears who helped inform some of your thoughts. If you could just drop those in the chat, we would be appreciative of those. Elnaz, we will make sure that you are added to the Slack community. We'll share out a quick link. Any more possibility of adding more than 3 factors for the sandbox on the horizon? Well, Nick and People Nerds are working on some partnerships, so Sarah, hopefully more information on that in the coming weeks. But yeah, big props and thank you to Nick, not only for this time, but I mean, folks, Nick and I have been talking for a few weeks, and during our second run through, he said, wait, what if I create a tool for everyone? And so this is very much a labor of love and something that was not in the initial ask from People Nerds. So thank you all for your time. Thanks to Nick for some of his. Thanks to my mom for an amazing quilt making my background. Not quite as good as Nick's, but close.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom. Props to Mama People Nerd. We will see you all next time. Our next panel is going to be about democratization. So some of the stuff that Nick was talking about, who gets to claim an insight or the ability to claim something as an insight, who gets to own the title mantle of researcher. D-Scout's founder will be talking with some other research leaders on how they're thinking about and working with others to bring them into the research process. So we'll see you next time. Nick, I will get to talk with you very soon, my friend. Thank you so much. And
hey, everybody.
We'll see you all next time.